Dr. Dan, when did you first fall in love with Philippians?
I think it was about 30 years ago. I think I've always liked Philippians. I've been a Bible reader all my life, and but about 30 years ago, I decided Philippians 4:4-7 was going to be my passage for the year, and that really was the entrance, the gateway to my study of Philippians the past 30 years.
So we've been studying Philippians 4:4-7 the last couple of weeks. I'm going to ask you what you like about that passage in a second. But first off, Dr. Dan's been working on his own translation of the book of Philippians, and he's going to have that done in a couple weeks. He's taught on this book many times in his Greek class at Cal Baptist, and he's going to gift it to our church, and we'll share it with you soon. How do you feel about that?
I'm scared,
I can't wait.
but excited too. Yeah.
I can't. I'm so excited. I think it'll be very, very special for our church. So you've given a lot of time to Philippians 4:4-7. Told me nothing really special about the actual passage itself of why you were drawn to it. Just it kind of happened. Um, Main idea is rejoicing in the Lord. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. Don't be anxious about anything, and pray. Have you been anxious before? Have you struggled with anxiety? Because you've always been like rejoicing in the Lord. I see that in you.
I yeah, and I think my initial work on this passage 30 years ago really brought that home to me. 30 years ago, still, I don't think I knew myself very well, particularly in an emotional sense. I think there was a lot I didn't know about myself. So I wasn't a very anxious person, so I didn't feel my anxiety kind of bubbling up all the time. But sometimes sometimes I'd feel this stuff that I thought, what is that? And I think when I started work on this passage, especially when I got to verses 6 and 7, I started thinking about what is anxiety? What is anxiety for me? So I began to, in those days, I began to make a list every day in the beginning of my time with the Lord about what things were making me anxious. I recognized that for me, I felt anxiety first, kind of right here in my sternum. Other people feel it in their belly, or in their head, or somewhere in their heart, a tightening of their chest. I felt it right here. And
What was making you anxious? What was top of your list?
money, probably 99 times out of 100. And I just told my students recently, we were talking about this, and I said I didn't have much money then. And so my real stress was that I didn't have enough. And I actually thought, all I need is to get at a point where I have money. I have more money than I have now, and then I won't stress about it. I won't be anxious anymore. That's crazy. So I think the more I have access to more money than I've ever had in my life. It's pretty natural, I guess, to be at my age. But it doesn't take that anxiety away. I think maybe the anxiety from day to day is worse now, even though I'm more secure financially. I think the stress that goes along with that is higher than it's ever been.
So then how did you incorporate prayer? Because, that's kind of the opposite action that we talked about this weekend. The opposite of doing anxiety is to do prayer.
Well, you said this, last weekend. I really found for me, as I was wrestling with this passage, and maybe what was new in regard to what I did with this in that gateway moment in regard to this book, was that I really began to wrestle with how to put into practice every day what I was learning in this passage. So I got to verse 6, and I'm like, okay, there are all of these prayer words here. You mentioned them, but I saw what Paul was saying in this passage is, when you're anxious, talk to God. And I just recognized in myself that that was not my natural tendency. I didn't naturally turn to God in prayer. And so I don't, even though I learned a lot about that at that point, I learned about, just stopping and talking about it. I don't know that I really, it really changed the course of my life that much in regard to prayer. That came later, probably actually only in the last 5 or 6 years have I really gotten to the point where I understand what it means to pray. I became a believer when I was 8 or 9. So I've been walking with the Lord, and I've never left that pursuit since I was 8 or 9. I've worked at following the Lord, but I think only began to learn to pray 5 or so years ago. There's a little book called "Praying the Bible" by Donald Whitney, that really changed the course for me. And he kind of presents a way to learn to pray using the Psalms. And I started following his pattern, and it's transformed my life in regard to praying. So when I didn't know what to pray before, I usually didn't pray. Or if I didn't recognize something that really caught my attention, I didn't pray. When I was anxious, I talked to everybody else in the world about what I was anxious about instead of talking to God about it. Well, eventually I would get to that. If nobody helped me, they didn't. I think that little book helped me to begin to use the words of Scripture itself, and specifically the Psalms, to maybe put words to something that I didn't even know that I needed to pray about.
It is a good book. You recommended that book to me. Highly recommend it. And tell me the other thing that you said you realized about prayer and your anxiety, of what you had to do.
When I was making in that process of making my anxiety list every day, I recognized a couple of things. So the first one was that my list didn't change from day to day. So I didn't actually make that list for very long, because every time I did it, it was the same list. Maybe a little bit different of the order, but probably the top 5 on that list were the same every single day. And that takes me to the other thing, is that I recognized pretty quickly that my talking to God about yesterday's anxiety, same ones I'm feeling today, they didn't cover me for today. So because that anxiety would still rise up in me right to this point, and if I was going to deal with that anxiety, I needed to talk to God about
every day.
Today. I need to talk to Him today and tomorrow about what I talked to Him about yesterday.
Well, I think that's a good thing to take away. I really do. You got to ask God to stand on guard every single day over our hearts and minds. It's not a one-time thing and then deal with it, but it's constantly coming to Him. I do want to say thank you for sharing about your anxiety. I think a lot of people struggle with their thoughts on money, other things. It is continual, and what God tells us to do is to come to Him with our cares. So I hope this is helpful. Always appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty, and can't wait to see your translation of Philippians soon.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Have a great day.
Bye.